You are the undead, forever without light, forever without hope. And so, you've journeyed to this faraway land where kingdoms come and die, countries buried in water or under the heels of a hero king, and that king's kingdom crumbled to dust by invaders. The land now is just a hollow ruin, infested with demons and creatures much like you. At the center of the rubble, you find a woman in emerald hood, wistfully staring off as she's done for far too long. The poor girl. She thinks you're someone she knew, someone precious, someone doomed much like you. Further out there is a scholar lamenting his broken toy, a construct that could reach past space and time. Curious, why not visit such a world? Through the forests and mountains, through the waters and caves, you find what you seek, and travel back through the fissures of time itself to a quaint little town with travelers much like you. A merchant promotes his wares, a child in tow. To him, she is a tool for trade. To you, just a kid playing with feathers. Has she no one in the world for her? Is she too set on a fruitless journey? Spare her your fate. The sweet child promises to await your return. No matter how long it takes, no matter what may happen, she'll be here, only for you.
Hello everyone, this is Sanadeske, and I hope you guys enjoyed this little intro I have made. I wanted to make this video special since Dark Souls 2 has a lot of unused content from its development, and for this specific video I'm going to be showing you guys the original draft of Dark Souls 2's story, as the game had a lot of troubles during development, so a lot of stuff changed in the game, and specifically the story, which is basically an entirely different story from the thing we got in the final game. I will also be explaining some of the stuff I showed in the intro as we go in with the video. So first I have to give thanks to Loki for translating all of the dialogues in this video from Japanese to English, as well as writing the script for the intro video. I have spent more than 2 weeks non-stop working on the footage and voice and stuff, so it would be very much appreciated if you guys give this video a thumbs up, and without further ado, let us talk about the original story of Dark Souls 2 that you never knew. So first things first, in this video I'm going to be focusing on the main plot points we have in terms of the characters and the world, because there is a lot of dialogues and just reading them out loud wouldn't be helpful really. So these dialogues are all linked together to a different time in the development of Dark Souls 2, most likely before they changed the directors and all of that, and I found all of them inside the files of the network test of Dark Souls 2. So the main area that has all of the dialogues is Majula. Now, the Majula back then wasn't exactly the Majula that we got in the final game. As you saw from the intro, it was supposed to be a Nexus-like hub area with stairs and everything, and seems like it was a much bigger area too, since there is actually a complete area outside with stairs and structures and everything. Now, we encounter the Emerald Herald, or Shanalot, that we all know and love, but she has some extra dialogue. She says the usual bearer seek seek lest intro, but she also tells you that she recognizes you and tries to remind you of her by looking at her face and showing you a feather. Now, the explanation for this is time travel, which was the main objective of our whole journey in Dark Souls 2 and the core of the story itself. This leads us to the next NPC, which is ironically called Vendrick. Now, just so you know, the King Vendrick that we have in our current Dark Souls 2 isn't actually called Vendrick in Japanese, but Vanclad. It is the same case with many other names, such as Aldia is called Andial. So for the sake of not misunderstanding everything, I will be calling the cut NPC the Scholar, and Vanclad will be King Vendrick as we already know, just so we don't mess stuff up. Now, luckily for us, and I quote the Scholar, I am Veldrick, the human possessing the greatest intellect in this country. He reminds me a bit of Mimir when he says this.
They call me Mimir, smartest man alive, and I have the answer to your every question.
So this guy talks about everything that we need to know. He has long lines of dialogue, but I will be telling you the main story he talks about. This scholar has been researching a device called the Pendulum of Time, which is a device that can be used to travel through space and time. Frankly, the original website of Dark Souls 2 actually has a picture of this pendulum, and as you can see, it looks like a globe or the earth itself, which is quite interesting regarding its use. Sadly, the website is now down, but thankfully JSF was able to use the Internet Archive to actually get this image. Now, in the intro, the guy that I showed is actually the unused scholar from Bloodborne, and I wanted a scholar model, and I found this guy to be perfect for the shot. And the area around him is actually one of the unused levels in Majula. Now, this scholar talks about two main things you need to find to make the pendulum work, which are the dragon's jewel and the drop of time. By finding them and using them with the pendulum, a person can travel back in time, and as he says, he can even call on His Majesty. He keeps talking about people not believing him and stuff, but he says that there is a room in the royal castle where he researched the pendulum, and the pendulum itself is in that room too. He tells us about the nature of the items we need to find. The dragon's jewel is, and I quote, "Do you know the legend of the rare gem that dwells within the womb of a dragon that's lived from the time immemorial? Apparently, it's related to the soul the dragon of antiquity births. That's why if I pursue the soul-starved demons, I think I can find the jewel." It's hard to know exactly what he means by this, but seems like dragons had a much bigger role in the story, and later on there is also a big mention for the dragons. As for the drop of time, he says, "There is an interesting legend in a certain old village. A miner who dug deeper underground discovered an inexhaustible spring inside of a cave. And then it's said one sip of that water and the next moment that miner was above the ground. Knowing this story, it occurred to me, isn't that a hole in space and time? The village was destroyed by the demons and I don't even know where the cave is, but the spring should be resting underground even now." Now, it could be possible that this was the original role of the hole that we have in Majula now, as the developers in the DesignWorks interview said that the hole was in a completely different place and served a completely different purpose. So after journeying around and finding those artifacts and use them, and as he says, you move the pendulum and possibly use it to travel back in time. Sadly, the NPC tells you that he will go to the castle to confirm his research, but we don't have the dialogues of the castle sadly, so we don't know what happens to him. Now, this is a huge bulk of the story, but there is another NPC in Majula which tells us even more new stuff, which is Shalakwar the cat. She has completely different dialogues and we can't talk to her normally without using a special ring. And this concept was actually used with the man Scorpion Tark, and ironically you actually buy the ring from her in the final game, which is called the Ring of Whispers. Anyways, she talks about lots of interesting stuff like her living in the royal castle, the war with the giants, and talking a little bit too about the device used to travel through time and space, which now we know is the pendulum. But one specific piece of dialogue caught my attention, which was this. "The forest stretches around the castle, but it looks pretty different now compared to long ago. The roots of the trees weren't as spread out as they are now, and the old ruins weren't buried. The ancient forest is so eerie because the god tree branches inside of the forest connect to demon heads. For that reason, the whole forest had transformed into demons. Right now, it's obstructed by trees and you can't go inside the forest." Now, she's talking about the forest that surrounds the royal castle, which seems to be the Shaded Woods. What's interesting is the demon trees that she talks about, which seem to fit the description of the trees we find in the Shaded Woods that have faces on them. So it's very interesting to know what they are or what they were supposed to be. She also has some very interesting dialogues about some of the areas and characters, and we can link these dialogues with some of the stuff we have in the game right now. So I will be reading the dialogues but in an edited fashion because she repeats a lot of stuff when she's talking. "Do you know of the race called Immortals? They prefer the darkness, so they made their castle in a place where the sun doesn't reach. As a result, it's flooded with rainwater or subterranean water, and now it's sunk to the bottom in deep water. There seems to be a route made in order to connect the country to the outside world, Soul Drift Cave. Lots of souls flow into its vicinity. The undead citadel that sunk to the bottom of the cold water. The immortal tribe that dwells there are undead beings the same as you. That's why death is irrelevant, but all the same it seems like they can't move within deep water." Now, it is very clear that the undead citadel is actually the undead crypt, and actually in the code it is called Immortal Castle. There is a lot of geometry like a throne room in the files of the undead crypt, which reinforces this idea even further. She even mentions the Soul Drift Cave, or it can also be translated as the Dreg Heap of Souls, as mentioned by JSF that it uses the same writing as the Dreg Heap for Dark Souls 3. So it seems like it is talking about the Shrine of Amana, and from the theme you can tell it actually fits the theme for being a place where souls flow into its vicinity. This also links up with the next dialogue. There is a village beneath the royal castle where a petite race dwells, and it appears they were made an outlet to drain the sewage for the people of the castle. But that race, the Gurm, or whatever they were called, they smelled awful. The king blocked up the entrance to the village. The Gurm, they apparently made a passage to the undead citadel in secret from the king. The Gurm are an honest and very industrious race, but it seems like it'll be difficult for humans to do since they are selfish. Now, if we see the entrance of the Shrine of Amana, it does seem like it was actually forcefully dug up, as you can say, and you can see a hole being made in the wall that leads to the road. It's a very interesting story really, as the Gurm didn't have a big role per se in the story, and it would have been cool to see what they had in mind for them, and they talk about them in the Designworks interview as manual laborers employed by the king to work on the underground waterways below the castle. One last thing about her dialogues. She says, there is a dragon egg fossil enshrined by humans in the egg ritual place that's inside the forest. It's the only proof showing the dragon of antiquity seldom seen now aren't legend. I heard from the queen's lady attendant that the queen tried hatching the dragon's egg in that place. Now, this might be the early story for Aldia's Keep since it has dragons and stuff, but it is hard to know exactly what it is. It is also noteworthy to say that Aldia's Keep was originally named the Dragon Research Facility. So much dialogue from a cat, but let us move on from her right now. So that is it for the main Majula area, and now it is time to use the pendulum to go back to the past. Now this part here has a lot of development issues as we have a lot of different map pieces and settings and everything that we can't really discern exactly what it is, but from the analysis that I've been doing by linking models, dialogues, geometry and story bits, it seems to be a snowy area with different structures. There is also something I need to point out is that far away in the distance in Majula you actually see this weird looking building which looks like a snowy kind of area. Illusory Wall, which was the guy who found some of the unused structures way back, theorized that this is actually the Undead Crypt, but from the files I have been seeing and analyzing, it seems like this is actually the hub area or the past hub area that we were supposed to go to, as the setting matches perfectly and the unused building structures in Majula also match perfectly with what we are seeing. It seems like they decided to just throw it in the background as an Easter egg or something. In the intro, I used mods and video editing to transform Majula into a snowy area just to show the context of what I'm talking about, and it honestly looks wonderful in my opinion. I wish we had some sort of like day-night cycle or like spring, winter, summer stuff cycle in Dark Souls. It would have been amazing to see the areas in that fashion. And as you already know, this is where we meet the child version of the Emerald Herald. There is a lot of dialogue for her, and oh my god, she is the cutest person in the world. Like, just reading her dialogues really shows the child nature in her, and it's just so adorable. I wish that we could have had someone voice acting her lines because she would have been a lovely NPC to have in the game. So this is actually what causes the Emerald Herald to know you in the future, because you already met her when she was a child, and it caused a little bit of a time paradox here. So one of the interesting things she talks about is the feather, which is called Estentia's Feather. She seems to be collecting these as they are special, and she gives you one also in the process and tells you to take care of it and not show it to anyone because it's very special and stuff. And from the description of the aged feather, it says she imagined a world of boundless possibilities from the mere sight of a feather. So it would have been very interesting to see how her role would have been, like maybe interacting with her in the past and seeing how it affects the future. It would have been amazing to see like what From Software had in mind with this. Now, another NPC which is linked to her in the same area, which seems to be a merchant of sorts, an arrogant one to be exact. He seems to use the child to get money from people or something, as he calls her his tool of trade. Nothing really interesting about him per se, but it seems like in the end you buy her or free her from him, and then he leaves the area. So in terms of the story, this is all we have about it, but it is so much information, and I'm glad I was able to showcase all of these stuff to you. And this is only like a very small portion of the game. Like, we only know of the hub area, so there are like a lot of other NPCs and dialogues and items and stuff that we never got to see, and maybe we'll never get to see, sadly, unless like From Software releases a debug version or something for Dark Souls 2, or do some mistakes like they did with Dark Souls Remaster. That would be amazing. But for the time being, this is the only material we have, and I think it's really amazing, like what we can do and theorize upon from these story bits and lore bits that we are having. There is still a lot of stuff in Dark Souls 2 in terms of unused cutscenes that I still haven't got enough time to work on, but be sure to subscribe because there is a lot of content coming up very soon. I also showcased the original draft of the Iron Key, which is very interesting, so make sure to check it out as well. Also, all of the dialogues that I've been talking about, they will be in the description below, so if you want to read them by yourself or use them for material and stuff, they're going to be in the description. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, and thanks to everyone for your huge support, and I will be seeing you later. Bye bye.